Previously on Alone in Remote Alaska. By the time you see this video, you may have seen my community post regarding the things that you don't ever buy at the store and the things that you can't walk out of the store without. And for me, the things that I can't walk out of the store without is, it could be its own food group as far as I'm concerned. Heavy cream, butter, and caramels. Those are my go-tos. I would say also coffee and beer. I don't typically drink soda, and so beer is my soda. I do allow myself to have a beer with dinner. One beer, I don't typically drink more than that. I'm drinking it for the flavor, not for the alcoholic effects of the drink. So all the alcohol that you see in my house up on the cabinet, that is truly just for medicinal or cooking purposes. I don't really drink hard liquor. On occasion, maybe I'll have some rum in a mixed drink, but I typically, other than that, don't drink hard liquor. And that includes wine. I'm not a wine connoisseur. I'm a steak and potatoes and beer kind of girl. If you ask me what my favorite meal is, I'll tell you a ribeye with homemade French fries and an ice cold Guinness. That is my all-time favorite meal right there. I could probably eat that every single day. Don't worry, there's plenty of steak in this freezer. One of them, somewhere. Yeah, I have to take everything out in order to find anything. I think I need to get another freezer just so I can stay organized. I'm pretty simple, really, if it comes down to it. I like a lot of different types of food, but processed foods are not one of them. So again, like I said, that was not my cart. I typically don't buy sweets other than the caramels. So if you were to come to my cabin and, want something quick to snack on, you'd be sad to find out that you're going to have to wait for me to make something because there's typically not any sweets in the house other than the caramels. No cookies, no cakes, no muffins, things like that. There's a funny reason for that, or at least I think this is the reason why I don't buy the things, is that when I was growing up, we would go grocery shopping, and especially as a teenager, I'd ask my mom, can we get this or can we get that? Typical junk food items. And my mom's usual response was no. And when you'd ask her why, she'd say, well, because you'll just eat it. That confused me. I always thought, well, isn't that the point of food, is to eat it? But what she meant was you'll eat it in one sitting and then it'll be gone. And I'm not buying stuff for you to just overindulge in. That didn't really sink in until much later in life. But I think it's for that same reason that I typically don't buy those things now, because otherwise I'll overindulge because I don't tell myself no when it comes to sweets. So if you want sweets in this cabin, it's typically just going to be the caramel candy. I will make desserts. As you saw, I made an apple crisp, and I have some recipes that I'll share with my viewers in the future for some things that I happen to like. However, I typically am not a baker. I'm not one to bake breads. For one, I don't get my cabin really warm enough to bake a true sandwich loaf or a rustic loaf of bread. Even anything that needs to rise, I don't keep the cabin that warm, so that's a little difficult. And cakes, I'm not really good at making cakes or muffins or anything like that. But I do like sweet bread, so zucchini bread and pound cake. I like to make things from scratch. And so all of these vegetables that you see here are going to be processed for future meals. I will be canning once I get the majority of my canning jars up here. And then I'm also going to share with you a recipe, because while I typically do love steak and potatoes, I do love a diverse diet of different cuisines. And one of those happens to be Asian food. I really love Asian flavors in my food. So I'm going to share with you just a quick and simple fermented recipe. And this is something that is very easy. It's usually used for making banh mi, or you can put it on bibimbap and things like that. But I'll share that with you in a moment. Let me start off by showing you how I'm going to preserve all of this celery that I have. Be sure to hit that like button, because it'll help other people see these videos too. So I want to preserve the celery that I purchased, and the easiest way to do that is to dehydrate it. By dehydrating it, I'm going to get a better flavor. I just want it to enhance the flavor of a dish. I don't necessarily want to bite into a piece of celery in something that I'm eating. So I prefer to dehydrate it. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to do it over my wood stove. But first, I need to prepare it. I just want to make sure that I have this celery chopped up nice and fine. I really want it minced more than anything. If I have something this size, it's going to dehydrate much quicker than something this size. And having this on the wood stove, I need to do it as in short of a period of time with as low of a heat as I can, because right now, things have warmed up and I'm not running the wood stove at a high temperature. In fact, there's a lot of mornings now where I'm not even lighting the wood stove. So it will take approximately full 24 hours for this to dehydrate. So I'm just going to use my deep fry basket, which I've lined with parchment paper. I'm going to put a thin layer of the celery in, and then I'm going to wedge it between my chimney and the backer board, where it's just going to hover about 2 feet above the wood stove. And over the course of basically a day, all the water will evaporate out of the celery. Through the magic of YouTube, I can show you some that's already dehydrated. So now I'm just going to take the celery and go ahead and put it into a little glass jar, put a lid on this, and this will stay on the shelf indefinitely. While the next batch of celery dehydrates on the wood stove, I'm going to show you how I make my pickled daikon and radish. And in a future video, I'll show you some dishes in which you can enjoy this particular ferment. In order to make the Vietnamese pickled daikon, radish, and carrot, what we're going to need is equal amounts of daikon and carrot. I'm using approximately 2 fairly good sized daikon and 1 bunch of carrots. But you want to go ahead and slice those into 1/4 inch thick slices, and then you're going to matchstick them essentially, but they're basically just going to be 1/4 inch all the way around and about 2 to 3 inches in length. And I'm going to work through the daikon and my carrots and put those in a bowl, and then we'll move on to the next step. If you're not familiar with daikon, it is a radish, but it's not a hot radish like a garden radish would be. It's more similar to jicama, and it's mild in flavor, very crisp and tangy, but not spicy. Now that we have our carrots and our daikon julienned, what we're going to want to do is sprinkle salt on them. So I have roughly 2 tablespoons of salt here, because I have roughly a pound of each daikon and carrot. And I'm just going to sprinkle that over and then work that around into the vegetables. We're going to cover all of these generously, and we're going to let that sit for roughly 15 to 20 minutes. The longer you let it sit, the more it'll help to soften these vegetables up. And that's what we're looking for. Right now, if we were to take one of these daikon strips, it would break. And that's not what we want. We don't want them to break. We want them to bend. Now, this one's a little too soft to show you, but we want it to do that naturally without breaking. And you can see this one's starting to break actually right there. So we're going to let these sit 15 to 20 minutes. Let that salt do its thing. And then we will move on to the next step, which is creating the brine. The daikon radishes are now soft enough that I can bend them without them breaking, and that's what you're looking for. You can see that there's just a lot of moisture that's been pulled out of the daikon and out of the carrot. So I'm going to drain that off. I'm going to rinse these, and then we're going to squeeze out any excess moisture and pack them into jars. All right, we're going to go ahead and make our brine. I have 1 cup of boiling water, 10 tablespoons of granulated white sugar, and 8 tablespoons of distilled white vinegar, and then some extra water. And we're just going to go ahead and stir in our sugar into our boiling water. We're going to stir that until it's dissolved. And to our water mixture, we are going to go ahead and add our 8 tablespoons of distilled white vinegar. I'm going to set this aside, and we're going to begin to pack our jars. One of the things that I'm really looking forward to this spring is getting this kitchen redone. I don't have major plans for the kitchen. I like a really rustic kitchen design. And when I say rustic, I mean rustic. That's one of the reasons I bought this cabin, is because it didn't really have a overly done kitchen, and I could live with it the way it is, to be honest with you. Though I find most of the things here I'm not using because I'm grossed out by the squirrel that was in the cabin. And even disinfecting, I'm still grossed out. But having a decent kitchen so I can actually cook in it and show you my workspace while I do things would be nice. Right now I'm limited on where I can set a camera and what I can do. But all I'm doing here is I'm just taking the rinsed daikon and carrots and squeezing out as much water, if any is left. I'm basically shaking it off. And then I'm just packing these into jars. I don't need to worry about leaving headspace or anything like that. And I should be able to get 2 jars. And these are just large quart-sized jars. I'm just going to pack them both full and tight of the mixture. Now, the ratio of carrot to daikon that I used was a little bit heavier on the carrot than it was on the daikon. I probably should have bought another daikon radish. But generally, it depends upon your preferences or what you're used to. Some restaurants will use heavier daikon, and some will probably, most likely, if you're in America, use more carrots because carrots are cheaper than daikon radishes. And so it just depends upon what your preference is and what you're used to in your area. And we don't want any dirt. You want to make sure your jars are clean and sterile. We're not water bath canning these. We're not pressure canning these. These are just a pickle. So they're just going to be basically a refrigerator pickle, a fermentation. We're going to let them sit at room temperature for at least 3 days, maybe more, until they get nice and fermented before we pack them into the refrigerator. All right, so now that I have both jars packed, I'm just going to take my vinegar and sugar mixture, and I'm just going to pour that over. And then I'm just going to top that off with some additional water. You do want all your vegetables to stay beneath the water line. If I had a fermentation puck, I would use that. But let me show you what I do instead. So instead of buying yourself a fancy fermentation puck, what I use is just a 4-ounce bell jar or ball jar, 4-ounce canning jar. And I'm just going to push that down. Now I'm going to overflow on this. So I'm going to set this inside of here. I probably should have done it before adding the extra water. But what this is going to do is this is going to press out any of the air. And as I put the lid on, it's going to hold all my vegetables below the brine. And that way I know that they'll get pickled and I don't have any contamination happening in my jar. So don't worry about buying yourself a fancy puck. Just buy yourself a 4-ounce canning jar to fit inside of your wide mouth quart-sized jar. Put your lid on. Put this on your countertop. And in a few days, just test it after 3 days. And in a few days, you should have pickled daikon and radish relish for your banh mi sandwiches or whatever Vietnamese type dish you would like. And like I said, they'll store for 5 months in the refrigerator. I'm going to set these off to the side, and then I will see you guys next week. I thank you for watching today's video, and please leave a comment down below and let me know how your spring is starting off. Look forward to it. Thanks. If you come here and you're expecting to be hungry and if